Have you ever walked into a room where everything screams, "You belong here," where the polished surfaces and hushed tones promise respect, yet every subtle signal tells you, you don't? It's a feeling many of us know too well, a quiet dismissal that cuts deeper than any shout. Today we're diving into the story of Arthur Art Vance, a man who built an empire from nothing only to find himself battling an invisible wall in the most unexpected place, a high-end bank. This isn't just a story about a loan. It's about dignity, resilience, and the moment one black man decided he wouldn't wait for permission to be seen. Stick around, because this ride is full of twists you won't see coming, and lessons that will resonate long after the engine cuts off. Have you ever walked into a room where everything screams, "You belong here," yet every subtle signal tells you, you don't? That's exactly how it felt the day Arthur Art Vance stepped into the polished, hushed lobby of Evergreen Financial Holdings in Sterling City. It was 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his crucial 11 a.m. meeting with Ms. Evelyn Reed, a senior vice president for commercial loans. Art, the self-made founder and CEO of Vance Innovations, a thriving tech consulting firm, was a man who commanded respect without needing to ask for it. He built his empire from the ground up, battling through countless obstacles, his quiet confidence a shield against the world's skepticism. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his leather briefcase clutched in his hand, Art exuded the kind of quiet authority that only comes from genuine accomplishment. He wasn't early out of nervousness. He was early because that's how you stay ahead. The bank itself was a monument to wealth, soaring marble walls, gleaming glass partitions, and a faint, expensive scent of fresh coffee mixed with polished wood. It was designed to impress, to convey stability and prestige. Yet as Art approached the sleek reception desk, a subtle shift occurred. Chloe, the receptionist, a woman with a perfectly coiffed bun and an air of practiced indifference, barely looked up. "Welcome to Evergreen Financial," she murmured, her voice clipped and automatic. "Arthur Vance, I have an 11 a.m. with Ms. Reed," Art stated, placing his briefcase on the counter. Chloe tapped at her keyboard, her eyes fixed on the screen. "You're on the schedule," she said, her tone neutral, not unkind but utterly devoid of warmth. "You can have a seat. She'll be with you shortly." Shortly. That word hung in the air, a polite dismissal. Art nodded, selecting a chair by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight streamed in, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminating the bustling efficiency around him. At first he barely registered it. Banks were busy, delays happened. But as 11:05, then 11:15, then 11:30, ticked by a pattern, began to emerge. A man in a sharp navy suit, probably in his early 30s, checked in with Chloe. Less than 5 minutes later, a junior banker appeared, ushering him behind the frosted glass doors of the executive offices. Then came a woman in a cream blazer. No appointment, it seemed. Just a casual, friendly chat with Chloe, a quick nod, and she too was led inside. Art's name remained uncalled. He watched others, mostly white professionals, arrive after him. Some greeted by name, some with casual nods, all swiftly directed past the very same glass doors he was waiting to enter. His appointment was confirmed twice. Yet he was still sitting here, an hour melting away, while at least 6 other people had walked in after him and disappeared into the inner sanctum. He felt the familiar knot in his stomach, a sensation he knew intimately from countless moments in his life. It was the feeling of being overlooked, of being unseen, of having your presence, your time, your very worth subtly diminished. This wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being ignored. It was the invisible wall that often stood between him and the opportunities others took for granted. Have you ever felt that invisible wall, that whisper in the back of your mind telling you that your presence matters less? It's a common mistake to internalize that dismissal, to blame yourself, or to simply give up. But Art Vance didn't build Vance Innovations by accepting the status quo. He built it by challenging it, by demanding his rightful place. And as the minutes continued to stretch, he knew this shortly was nothing short of a calculated delay. The polite smile and neutral tone were just masks for a deeper issue, and he wasn't about to let it slide. He knew this initial feeling of being overlooked, of being made to wait, was just the beginning. And as he watched yet another client, a woman with a designer handbag confidently striding in, immediately greeted and ushered away. Without a moment's delay, Art understood that the invisible wall wasn't just in his head. It was a tangible, active barrier, and it was time to understand its unwritten rules. The air in that lobby grew thick with unspoken rules. Rules that weren't printed on any sign but were clear as day to those who knew how to read them. Art Vance, a man who had navigated countless boardrooms and back alleys to build his empire, was certainly fluent in this unspoken language. He watched calmly as the procession continued. A young couple looking nervous were swiftly taken care of. An older gentleman whistling a tune was ushered past the frosted glass doors within minutes of his arrival. Art had now been waiting for well over an hour, his 11 a.m. appointment a distant memory. He tried to suppress the rising frustration, telling himself banks get busy, things happen. But his instincts, honed over years of dealing with subtle barriers, screamed otherwise. This wasn't mere inefficiency. This was a pattern, a meticulous, calculated exclusion. He observed how Chloe, the receptionist, seemed to have two distinct modes, the polite but impersonal automaton for some, and a suddenly warmer, more engaged professional for others. The latter group, it didn't escape Art's notice, often shared a certain demographic profile, one that didn't include him. At 11:30 a.m., with the minutes now dragging into an absurd eternity, Art decided to test the waters. He rose from his comfortable but increasingly frustrating perch and walked back to Chloe's desk. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm even, "has Ms. Reed been made aware that I'm still waiting?" Chloe sighed, a short, almost imperceptible puff of air, as if Art had interrupted her deep contemplation of the screen in front of her. She tapped a few keys, not bothering to make eye contact. "She knows," she said, her voice flat. "She's just finishing up with another client." Art waited. For an apology, an updated time, even a flicker of empathy. Nothing. Chloe simply went back to typing. "Do you have an estimate on when she'll be available?" he pressed, holding back the urge to lash out. Chloe barely glanced at the screen before offering a shrug. "It shouldn't be much longer." It shouldn't be much longer. There it was again. That word, soon, shortly, not much longer. It was a linguistic trap, a delay without a deadline, a promise without commitment. It was a word designed to pacify, to keep you rooted in place, and to allow people to pretend they weren't doing exactly what they were doing, making you wait and making you feel insignificant. Have you ever been caught in that soon trap? That feeling of being perpetually strung along, your time and dignity held hostage by someone else's vague promises? It's a common tactic used to manage expectations, or in more insidious cases to manage access. And it's a mistake to just accept it. Then right in front of him, the ultimate confirmation arrived. A woman swept in her designer handbag, swinging her voice light and easy as she finished a phone call. This was Mrs. Hawthorne, a well-known figure in Sterling City's elite circles. Chloe's posture changed instantly. Her lips curved into a genuine smile, her voice losing its clipped edge. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," she chimed, her tone lighter, more polished. "Mrs." Hawthorne gave a polite nod, barely breaking stride before a young banker materialized at her side, ushering her toward the back offices. No waiting, no questions, no being told soon. Art stood there, a quiet storm brewing within him. He had been there for almost an hour and a half. Mrs. Hawthorne had been there for less than a minute. The unseen rules were now glaringly, painfully clear. There were different rules for different people. And for Art, a successful black man, those rules meant waiting at the back of the line even when he had an appointment. This wasn't about being busy. This was about access. This was about privilege. Discrimination isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through silence and selective access. And Art knew, with a sudden searing clarity, that he couldn't let this whisper go unchallenged. He would not allow himself to be a silent victim of these unseen rules. He took a slow, steadying breath, his fingers drumming lightly against his briefcase. The time for observation was over. The time for action had begun. Every fiber of his being screamed to just walk away, to cut his losses, to preserve his peace. But Arthur Vance didn't build his empire by walking away from what was right. He built it by walking into the discomfort, by confronting the subtle indignities that tried to hold him back. This wasn't just about a loan application anymore. This was about dignity. This was about the countless times in his life he'd been made to feel less than simply because of who he was. Art took a deep breath, the polished silence of the lobby suddenly feeling heavy. He rose not quickly, not aggressively, but with an undeniable quiet purpose. He walked past the front desk, past Chloe's blank expression, and headed straight for the frosted glass doors leading to the executive offices. "Sir?" Chloe's voice, usually so clipped and indifferent, held a surprising edge of alarm. But Art didn't stop. He pushed open the door. Inside, a hushed hallway stretched before him, lined with private offices. Some doors were ajar, others closed, but one thing was immediately clear. Ms. Evelyn Reed was not in a meeting. She was sitting at her large mahogany desk, typing on her laptop alone. She looked up, her expression shifting instantly from mild concentration to startled irritation. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice tight, "you should have waited to be called." Art met her gaze evenly, his own expression calm but resolute. "I did wait," he stated, his voice steady. "For almost 2 hours." Ms. Reed's fingers hovered over her keyboard, her lips pressing into a thin line. The carefully constructed facade of the busy executive was crumbling. "Please take a seat," she finally managed, gesturing vaguely to the chair opposite her desk. Art sat not because she'd allowed him, but because he chose to. This wasn't about her rules, it was about his conviction. "I apologize for the delay," she continued, forcing a brittle smile. "We've been extremely busy today." "Busy?" Art let the word hang in the air, a silent challenge. "Were you truly—" "Because I counted at least half a dozen clients who walked in after me and were ushered straight through, some without even an appointment." Ms. Reed's face stiffened. Her eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and annoyance, betraying the careful neutrality she tried to maintain. "I assure you, Mr. Vance, that wasn't intentional. There must have been a miscommunication." "A miscommunication?" Art exhaled slowly through his nose, his gaze unwavering. "Interesting. Because it looked less like a miscommunication and more like a deliberate pattern of prioritizing others over a scheduled client." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping just a touch, filled with a quiet intensity that was far more impactful than any shout. "Ms. Reed, I have built a multi-million-dollar company. I have dealt with condescending investors, navigated hostile takeovers, and been underestimated in rooms full of men who thought they knew better. But this—" He paused, letting his words sink in. "This isn't about my business plan or numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about being ignored, about being dismissed as if my time, my presence, my very being wasn't worth an update." Have you ever had to stand your ground calmly but firmly against someone who fundamentally underestimated you? It's a delicate dance requiring immense self-control. Common mistakes in this moment include losing your temper, which only serves to validate the other person's dismissive narrative, or backing down, which only reinforces their power. Art chose the path of unwavering conviction. Ms. Reed's jaw tightened. She was clearly uncomfortable, caught off guard by his directness. She fumbled with some papers on her desk, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Now, Mr. Vance," she began, her voice regaining a hint of that polished, dismissive edge. "Let's discuss your loan application. I've had a chance to review it, and while your finances are impressive, we do have strict criteria for approvals." She barely finished her sentence, because at that precise moment the door to her office swung open and the entire energy of the room shifted. A new presence, a different kind of authority filled the space. It was the kind of presence that made Ms. Reed's carefully constructed world come crashing down. The door to Ms. Evelyn Reed's office swung open and the entire energy of the room shifted. Ms. Reed, mid-sentence about loan criteria, froze, her eyes widening. The hallway, which had been quiet moments ago, was suddenly filled with the low hum of authoritative voices. These weren't just any voices, these carried weight. 3 men stepped inside, all in impeccably tailored suits, their presence unmistakably commanding. These were the power players, the decision-makers, the kind of men whose approval meant everything in a place like Evergreen Financial. And at the front of them was a familiar face, a face that instantly struck fear into Evelyn Reed's heart, and a flicker of surprise followed by a knowing smile into Art Vance's. It was Mr. Jonathan Thorn, the CEO of Evergreen Financial Holdings. Thorn's sharp, intelligent eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. Evelyn Reed flustered and rigid behind her desk, and Art Vance, calm and composed, seated opposite her. His gaze landed on Art, and a genuine smile, warm and utterly unfeigned, lit up his features. "Art," Thorn exclaimed, breaking the tense silence, his voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "What on earth are you doing here?" Evelyn Reed's face went pale. Art stood shaking Thorn's hand firmly. "Jonathan, good to see you. Been a while." "It has." Thorn clapped him on the shoulder. "Still innovating advanced solutions, I trust. Still changing the game." "Still growing it," Art replied smoothly, a faint smirk touching his lips as he glanced at Evelyn. Evelyn stared between them, her jaw slack, her fingers tightening around the folder in front of her. The polished facade she'd maintained for hours shattered in an instant. The twist wasn't just that the CEO walked in, it was that the CEO knew Art deeply respected him and saw him as an equal. Thorn wasn't just a powerful figure. He was a man Art had once advised on a critical philanthropic tech initiative years ago, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared vision. Their connection was real, personal, and profoundly significant. Thorn's easy smile faded as he looked at Evelyn. "Evelyn," he said, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that sent a shiver down her spine. "How long has Art been waiting?" Silence. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came out. Art didn't answer right away. He let the weight of the question settle, let the uncomfortable truth hang heavy in the air. Over an hour and a half of calculated dismissal. "Almost 2 hours, Jonathan," Art said finally, his voice still level but clear. Thorn's face didn't change dramatically, no theatrical explosion of anger. But Art saw the subtle twitch in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. 2 hours. Thorn repeated, his tone deceptively light. "You had Arthur Vance of Vance Innovations waiting for 2 hours." Evelyn scrambled for words. "There was a scheduling issue, Mr. Thorn, an oversight." Thorn didn't even look at her. His attention remained solely on Art. "You should have called me directly, Art," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I would have ensured you were taken care of immediately." Art offered a small, knowing smile. "Didn't think I needed to. I expected standard professionalism." Thorn sighed, the weight of the situation settling upon him. He turned to Evelyn, his smile now completely gone. "Evelyn," he said, his voice calm but utterly final. "Step outside for a moment, now." Evelyn's face was now a shade paler than before. Her hands tightened into fists under the desk before she visibly forced them to unclench. "Of course, Mr. Thorn." She managed her voice barely a whisper as she stood quickly and exited the office without another word. The moment the door clicked shut, Thorn turned back to Art, shaking his head again. Integrity starts at the top, and true leaders recognize value beyond appearance. Jonathan Thorn, a man who had built his empire on trust and reputation, understood immediately the damage Evelyn had inflicted. It wasn't just about disrespecting Art. It was about betraying the very values Evergreen Financial claimed to uphold. His swift, decisive action wasn't just about damage control, it was about reaffirming that true leadership demands accountability and fosters an environment where everyone's worth is recognized, regardless of unspoken rules or biases. He knew the ripples of this oversight could spread far beyond this office, and he was ready to address the source of the problem. The door clicked shut behind Evelyn, but the tension in the room lingered, a palpable hum of consequence. Jonathan Thorne let out a slow breath, shaking his head as he took a seat across from Art. The other two executives stood nearby, exchanging knowing glances, but saying nothing. This wasn't just about a heated moment in a bank office. It was about the integrity of an entire institution. Art. Thorne said, his tone steady but clipped. This isn't how we do things here. Art tilted his head slightly. Seems like it is, Jonathan, at least from where I was sitting. Thorne let that sit for a second. He didn't argue, didn't try to make excuses. Men like him, men who sat at the pinnacle of their industries, knew when something had gone profoundly wrong. And right now, Thorne was calculating exactly how big a problem this was. Art Vance wasn't just some walk-in client. He had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from the ground up, his reputation carrying immense weight in business circles. He knew people, powerful people, people who trusted his word. And now he had a story. "I appreciate you telling me," Thorne said, his voice grim. "And I'll be honest, I'm furious. This is the kind of thing that wrecks reputations. We've worked too damn hard to build Evergreen Financial's credibility, and now I have to clean up a mess I didn't even know existed." He turned to one of his executives. "Make sure Evelyn is off the floor immediately. We'll have a longer conversation about this later." The man nodded and stepped out without another word. Thorne turned back to Art. "That loan application you submitted, I assume it was solid." Art tapped his briefcase. "See for yourself." Thorne took the folder and flipped through it. He barely made it through the first few pages before shaking his head. This shouldn't have even been a question. He glanced at the remaining executive. "Fast track it. I want an approval on my desk by end of the day." Just like that. Art raised an eyebrow, a hint of irony in his voice. Thorne met his gaze. "You should have had it 2 hours ago. I'm fixing the mistake." Art considered that. This wasn't about generosity. It wasn't even purely about making things right. It was about control, about damage limitation, about ensuring that the story stopped here in this office before it bled into places Thorne didn't want it to reach. And Art, having navigated corporate politics for years, understood that game better than anyone. Still, he wasn't about to let Thorne off that easy. "I'll accept the approval, Jonathan," Art said, standing, "but fixing this for me doesn't fix the real issue." Thorne's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. "We'll be having a very long conversation about that," he said, his voice resolute. Art grabbed his briefcase, nodding once, a silent acknowledgement of the understanding between them. He walked toward the door, but before he left he made sure to meet Chloe's gaze one last time. Her usual impassive mask was gone, replaced by a mixture of shock and unease. She didn't look nearly as confident now. The warm, sterling city air pressed against Art's skin as he stepped outside. The bank's pristine exterior gleamed under the midday sun, but inside the cracks had already formed. This wasn't just about a loan. It wasn't even just about Evelyn. It was about something bigger, something that played out in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different places every single day. The assumption that some people belonged in those offices while others had to wait. The quiet dismissals, the polite rejections, the carefully constructed barriers that could always be explained away. But not today. Today someone had to face the consequences, and the next time Evelyn Reed looked at a name on her appointment list, she'd think twice. Art checked his phone. A new email. "Loan approved." He smirked, tucking it into his pocket as he walked toward his car. Respect isn't given, it's demanded. And today, he got what he came for. If you've ever been in a situation like this, if you've ever been made to feel like your time, your presence, your very being wasn't valued, hear this. Speak up. Don't wait for permission. Take your seat at the table. And if they try to keep you waiting, make sure they remember why that was a mistake. Because your resilience, your voice, and your unwavering belief in your own worth are the most powerful forces for change. The sun still gleamed on the facade of Evergreen Financial, but for Art Vance and for Evelyn Reed, nothing inside would ever be quite the same. This wasn't just about a loan approval, it was about a systemic crack exposed, a quiet battle fought and won. Art's journey that day echoes the experiences of countless Black individuals who navigate spaces designed to diminish their presence. It's a stark reminder that the fight for respect often happens not with grand gestures, but with quiet defiance, unwavering self-worth, and the courage to call out what's hidden in plain sight. So if Art's story resonates with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued simply because of who you are, know this: your voice matters. Your experience matters. Don't let anyone make you invisible. Speak up. Trust your gut. Demand the respect you've earned, not just for yourself, but for every single person who might walk through that door after you. Hit that like button. If you've faced similar walls, subscribe to join our community and share your own stories in the comments below. Let's keep these conversations going, because when we stand together, the invisible walls begin to crumble.